Order, order.
Draft Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024.
Is it the wish of the committee that the instruments be debated together?
It is.
In that case, I'll now call on the Minister to move the first motion and speak to both instruments. At the end of the debate, I will put the question on the first motion and then ask the Minister to move the second motion formally. Minister, would be good enough to move the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Stronger. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair today. I beg to move that the Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024, which were laid and drafted for this House on the 22nd of May 2024, and the Unique Identifiers Application of Company Law Regulations 2024, which were laid and drafted in this House on the 31st of October 2024, be approved. These regulations form part of a programme to implement the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023, which I will refer to as the 23 Act. The 23 Act is a landmark piece of legislation which delivers the most significant reforms to Companies House in over 180 years to protect the public from fraud and deliver real benefits to the business community. There's already been much progress since the 23 Act was passed, including the introduction of stricter rules and checks to help Companies House cleanse the register. The two sets of regulations we are debating today will help implement perhaps the most important changes to the UK's company registration framework in the 23 Act, requiring identity verification for those setting up, running and controlling companies. Through amendments to the Companies Act 2006, the 23 Act establishes two ways in which an individual can verify their identity, either directly with Companies House or by an authorised corporate service provider, which I will now refer to as ACSP. These providers must be supervised for anti-money laundering purposes and registered with Companies House. I'll now set out specifically what the two instruments do. The first, the Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024, set out the legal framework that underpins identity verification. The identity verification procedure will involve an individual delivering specific information to the registrar or to an ACSP. This must include their name, date of birth and any further information specified in the registrar's rules, which are a form of tertiary legislation. Given the technical increasingly evolving mechanisms for identity verification, it would be inappropriate to list every single identity document that must be provided to the registrar or an ASCP, or every single step an individual must take in the regulations. Instead, the registrar is enabled to specify the requirements in a more suitable format and adapt or tweak the detail quickly where necessary. Companies House have produced a draft version of the registrar's rules, which I hope is on the table there for members to see, which will hopefully provide some examples of the kind of information that might be required from applicants. When the registrar or ACSP receives all the correct information from an applicant, they will grant the identity verification application if they are satisfied that the information provided is true. That is the broad legal process for identity verification. In practice, Companies House will use the gov.uk One Login platform to deliver their identity verification service. One Login is a cross-government verification platform enabling users to have a single login and verified identity for multiple government services. An individual will create an account and can verify their identity using a range of evidence like passports or driving licences, or through knowledge-based verification questions based on their credit record or banking information. The process also includes checks to make sure the individual matches the picture on their photo ID. For most people completing the purely digital route, this process will take a matter of minutes. Individuals can also complete the process in person at the post office. If an individual decides to verify it via an ACSP, the ACSP must follow the legal procedure established in these regulations and in the registrar's rules. Companies House will issue guidance to ACSPs to explain how the procedure should be applied in practice and what checks they must perform on the information received. This will ensure that both routes achieve the same level of assurance in identity verification. Once an ACSP verifies an applicant's identity, they will deliver a verification statement to Companies House to confirm that they followed the correct procedure. This verification statement will be published alongside the applicant's appointments on the register to maximise transparency. Alongside this verification statement, ACSPs must give the registrar information about the evidence they relied on to verify an individual's identity. This means Companies House will not lose access to crucial identity data if someone uses an ACSP, and will also provide them with assurance that the identity checks have been completed correctly. The regulations add other checks and balances to the ACSP regime. ACSPs will be required to maintain records relating to the identity verification for 7 years from the date they determine the identity verification request. The Registrar can suspend and deauthorise an ACSP if they consider they are not fit and proper to carry out the functions of an ACSP. Finally, the Registrar can perform spot checks on ACSPs and ask them to provide information about their identity verification obligations. All of these provisions combined ensure that Companies House have the tools at their disposal to ensure that the ACSP regime is as effective and robust as possible. I'll now just turn briefly to the second set of regulations, Mr. Stringer, the Unique Identifiers Application of Company Law Regulations 2024, which are technical and applied provisions on unique identifiers contained in the Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024 to other entities. A key mechanism underpinning the operation of identity verification is the use of a unique identifier or personal code, which will be used to identify individuals who have had their identity verified as well as registered ACSPs. The first set of regulations we covered will enable allocation of unique identifiers to individuals associated with companies. These regulations give the Registrar power to allocate unique identifiers to ACSPs and individuals associated with other entities, namely limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships, companies authorised and register, unregistered companies and Scottish qualifying partnerships. Identity verification requirements will eventually apply to other entities registered at Companies House, so it is necessary that we make these regulations to ensure that these requirements can operate in practice. Finally, I want to provide an update to the committee on the timings of identity verification. Companies House published their outline transition plan last October. This confirmed that they aim to start requiring identity verification from autumn of this year. In a few weeks, ACSPs will be able to register and individuals will be able to voluntarily verify their identity with Companies House, giving people lots of time to complete this process before legal requirements actually start.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024. Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. A pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. If I can start with the Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024. I'm pleased to see that the government are continuing this legislation, which was first proposed in May 2024 by the previous government, legislation which will assist Companies House in identifying individuals, improve efficiency and reduce fraud. The Companies Act 2006 required individuals who set up, ran or controlled a company to verify their identity. Individuals may verify their identity through the Registrar directly or via an authorised corporate service provider, such as an accountant or solicitor. The aim of the identity verification requirements is to prevent individuals creating a fictitious identity or fraudulently using another person's identity to set up and run a company. However, prior to the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023, the legal framework required Companies House to accept information from entities and individuals in good faith with no checks to confirm that someone registered as a director or person with significant control has given their consent or is indeed a real person. This instrument sets out the procedure that must be followed for an individual to have their identity verified or re-verified by either the Registrar or by an ACSP. For instance, identity verification applications must contain specific information, and this SI confers a power on the Registrar to require further types of information and evidence. This instrument also provides a framework for the suspension and deauthorisation of ACSPs judged by the Registrar not to be fit and proper persons, as well as requires ACSPs to keep particular records relating to identity verification checks as they complete and introduces duties for ACSPs to provide updated information to the Registrar. The aim is to prevent nefarious agents from acting on behalf of their clients. Finally, the regulations introduce offences if the ACSP fails to comply with the duty to keep records or provide information to the Registrar upon notice, and the instrument makes provisions for the allocation and discontinuation of unique identifiers which will be allocated to all individuals who have had their identity verified and to ACSPs. I welcome the measures taken by the government in this SI, which builds on the work of the previous government. However, given the importance of the legislation, I would ask the Minister to provide some further clarity on two areas. Firstly, what assessment he's made on how much this will reduce administrative costs in Companies House. And secondly, the impact assessment made no mention of the cost of this on small and medium enterprises. So what assessment has the Minister made in that regard? Turning to the unique identifiers application of company law regulations 2024, again, I'm pleased to see that this statutory instrument builds on the good work of the previous government through the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023. This statutory instrument builds on the Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 24 by extending the provisions to individuals associated with limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships. It will assist Companies House in identifying individuals, improving efficiency and reducing fraud. The two particular questions I have for the Minister on this particular statutory instrument is once more what assessment he's made on how much this will reduce the administrative costs in Companies House, and secondly, different to the first instrument that we discussed, as no impact assessment was carried out for this statutory instrument, but one was conducted for the Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024, if the Minister could explain that discrepancy.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Stringer. So, the Shadow Minister, I'm pleased to see, has already started using the acronym ACSP. It's very encouraging. I'm sure it will enter the vernacular very shortly. So, in terms of the cost to businesses, individual verification is there's going to be free to businesses to be able to log in. There is an estimate that the average time it will cost will be £10.50 to verify their identity and £2.10 to confirm verification for each appointment held. It's estimated from the impact assessment the annual cost to UK businesses will be about £19.5 million in ongoing operational expenses. It should be said, we believe that this will be of actual benefit to the legitimate businesses, enabling them to move forward with confidence that they are who they say they are. Of course, there are estimates that the company's register is worth up to £3 billion to the UK economy each year due to the amount of information that is available free to the public. And in terms of the question he asked about the cost to Companies House, he'll be aware that the incorporation fees have been increased in recent times, and indeed there's an economic crime levy that's also been apportioned to Companies House to recognise the fact that there are substantial new demands on Companies House, and indeed there are substantial numbers of new staff that have been recruited to undertake these activities. But it's not intended to increase the cost to Treasury. It's expected that these costs will be generally recovered through the Companies House activities. In terms of the impact assessment, my understanding is that the second regulation would not have attracted an impact assessment due to the estimated cost that it would be to individual businesses. I will double check that point for him and will write to him if that proves to be correct, but that's normally the case. I think there's a £5 million floor on impact assessments, and my understanding is it didn't exceed that, therefore no impact assessment was required. On that note, Mr Stringer, I'd like to thank the committee for their time, and I would like to commend the regulations to the House.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Registrar Identity Verification and Authorised Corporate Service Providers Regulations 2024. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Draft Unique Identifiers Application of Company Law Regulations 2024.
Minister, will you move it formally?
Move formally.
Thank you. The question is that committee has considered the draft unique identifiers application of company law regulations 2024. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.